All right, thank you, Kachi. Good afternoon, everyone, and good day to the rest of the world,
Yeah,
wherever
you're. I said, slow down. You are
wherever,
just running. You know how much information? No.
wherever you're joining us from. It's my pleasure to share with you just a few nuggets on how you manage sales through the COVID-19 pandemic. What I'm going to do is just in a couple of minutes talk about the impacts of the pandemic, how it's affected the world, the impact on sales, and initiatives to try and recover and drive sales post-COVID, and then just sort of summarize. So I think this will take us 30 minutes or less for us to do that. I'm sure a lot of the other speakers have spoken about what has happened since COVID. But the key thing and the impact is coming from the fact that it has resulted in lockdowns and restrictions of movement for consumers. And also, as a result of this lockdown and stoppage of movement, disruptions in supply chains. There have been stay-at-home orders limiting access to consumer channels where consumers will go. Business processes, premises have been shut down, supply chains have been shut down or affected or slowed down. And actually a number of us have had to start to operate and work out of home. And what has happened to sales as a result of this is either due to the restriction, all right, or the disruption in the movement of physical goods, a number of categories have seen their sales drop or actually see a number of their sales move to online channels. And the drop in sales vary depending on the category that you belong to. So if you look at FMCG, certain categories might have seen an uplift because during this period, food businesses were allowed to continue. Cleaning, especially hand washes, personal care products, seen some growth. But areas like hospitality shut down, travel shut down, finance to a limited extent, except those, of course, who have developed technology, and therefore a lot of the businesses have moved online. And I think this has also thrown up the challenge or the limitations of some of the services, especially those that are using technology. It's still absurd that there are certain things you have to go and do physically in your bank, which you could have done online, right? And so when the banks reopened, it was a challenge to see the number of queues that you found outside of the banks. And of course, the tech businesses, especially those that offer the foundation or access or tools to be able to leverage the challenge that COVID has given us. It also meant certain channels were shut down, depending on the categories, bars, restaurants, right? Supermarkets, okay, to a certain extent were limited. And so created certain challenges, okay? Management of customer finances, arrangements, where you have credit facilities. Sometimes you have to visit a customer face-to-face to be able to manage and collect your credit. So some of these things were affected, and disruptions in supply chain. Shipping for companies that support them initially were not allowed. So even though you were a food business, but your packaging partner was not allowed to operate, you probably didn't have access to the packaging material that you need to put your products in them. And even some of the services, okay, you had a breakdown in your plant, the spare parts stores or the spare part dealers were not open for you to be able to supply that. So there are different areas where the impact hits different companies. And also in terms of how you manage field people and how you manage your team in terms of customer coverage, sales coverage, and also coaching, right? So a lot of this moved online, and the level of efficiency or effectiveness of how you manage customers online, how you manage your sales team online, because it's very easy for a salesperson to put a screensaver and tell you that I'm in the customer's shop or I'm here while I'm sleeping at home. So these are some of the challenges and the way sales were impacted as a result of the restriction in movements, the lockdown, and the disruptions in the supply chain. Now, to manage some of these things, right, there are a number of things that have happened. And one is the impact of technology and the use of technology and the shift in consumer channels. So for a number of categories, we saw sales move online, all right? However, you still have to do the last mile. So depending on where you are, right, it was more efficient than other parts of the country. So for places like Abuja, places like Lagos, places like Port Harcourt, where you had services already providing, logistics partners already providing the last mile distribution, it was very, very easy to latch on. But there are certain parts of the country where these services do not exist. And so despite the fact that you had the opportunity to be able to, for example, serve or sell food or deliver food to people, the guys to deliver this did not exist. So I think what is critical for people who manage sales is to understand that your coverage of channels have to be adjusted to recognize the shift or lack of access to physical channels for consumers, depending on the category that you operate in. Some categories have been in advance. To buy an airline ticket, for example, you really didn't need to go to an office to do that. Yes, if there are slight issues, you could handle it. But actually, even those issues that require face-to-face can be handled offline and therefore do not require that. So there are certain businesses that were in advance. And basically, what has happened with COVID is that, okay, that will accelerate further adoption of technology to be able to drive sales. But the critical thing is to always remember there's a fundamental in sales, right? You fish where the fish are. So basically, your selling, your coverage should always follow where the consumers are going. Now, one of the things that has happened over time is we tend to stay fixed to channels either because we like the particular channels or because it's easier for us to deal with those channels. And sometimes we lose opportunities by not recognizing that the consumer is already shifting away from that channel, and therefore our coverage models have to shift in line with the consumers. I think it's one of the biggest lessons that we have to take out of how we manage post-COVID. Just to go back to the fundamental and remember that you fish where the fish are. Our coverage of sales channels should be following the pathway of the consumers. If we keep our eyes open on the external market, understand where the consumer is shifting, then we can actually start to build and develop platforms for how we can follow and therefore execute the sales transactions with these consumers. Technology becomes more critical. So for businesses that have been averse to technology, this is an opportunity for you to actually adopt technology to drive your sales. Again, it can be as simple as a telephone call. It doesn't have to be complex, right? It can be as simple as a telephone, an app, or something a lot more sophisticated than what you have. So how will you manage your customers, right? How will you drive business development with customers? How will you cover the channels, and how would you measure the execution of your sales drivers at retail? How will sales operations close the loop from forecasts and other management to actual delivery of the product, right? A sale only happens when the final product is in the hand of the consumer and is actually consumed. Physical distribution or closing the last mile becomes very, very critical. One of the major beneficiaries of this particular period worldwide was Amazon. And that's because over time, they had been trying to build one of the most efficient distribution systems. People have to remember they were not making a profit from their logistics or distribution business. However, they've been logging at it, trying to cut down, remove layers, remove expenses, and manage that. And guess what? When the world was locked down, they had an opportunity because they already had the framework or they already had the platform that will continue to do and drive distribution and therefore ensure that customers can have access to their goods. So it's critical for sales people and sales managers and people who are leading sales teams, not just to focus on the order, on the transaction or getting the sales in, but how the sales get to the customers and how you complete the loop and how the cash comes into the company, right? And how you manage that using technology where there's no interface, with the customer. The customer can actually transfer money from his account into your account, and you have certain software that can actually do all the reconciliation, and therefore you can do the transfer. But the physical goods have to be moved by somebody from one point to another. And depending on the size of the customer or the kind of coverage that you cover, you may find out that you need a distribution partner that is able to disaggregate these goods that you have if you're dealing with physical goods, and therefore move the goods across to the various customers or consumers as you need. And the last point is around how you manage your sales team and also drive their development. Because sales guys are like the field forces. You have to be with them most of the time on the ground to understand what they're going through, to be able to work with them and therefore help them as they make their calls and correct. Now you don't have that opportunity because there's limitations in movement, and therefore you will have to do this offline. Now, depending on the terrain where they are and the access to the technology, becomes something that is very, very difficult. So there are certain levels of trainings that will have to move online, and therefore people will have to start to self-train, and you have to create time for you to be able to back check or ensure that, okay, these guys are working on the things they're supposed to do. The same way you would manage the customers, the same way you'll manage your team. And we have to assume, right, that everyone is teachable. One of the things I find most absurd is we think that our customers, because they don't speak English, right, I'm talking this time now in particular to FMCG customers, because they are illiterate, we think they cannot adopt technology or they cannot use it. No, all we have to do is to speak to them in the language that they understand. We've got to sell the benefits of why they have to change, right? So the focus is not on the technology, the focus is on what the technology does for them. And this is a watch out, because as everyone is talking, move online, use technology, you've got to watch the cost of the technology you're adopting and what it will actually give you. Because you can make a lot of investment and you find out that you don't actually get the return that you deserve because not all the transactions have moved on. There are still certain challenges. You can't order a bar of soap that costs 100 naira and where you have a logistic or distribution fee of 200 naira. It's just not going to happen. So there are certain challenges that have to be dealt with and things that have to be put into consideration if you're trying to manage your team, you're trying to manage how you execute sales, especially post-COVID. So just to summarize, COVID is just another disruptor, right? So I don't see it as anything special. It's a pandemic, yes. The effects have been more dramatic and drastic, but basically, every time we tend to get one disruptor that changes the way consumers react, where consumers shop, the way consumers operate, and the way society operates. The key is to always understand those disruptors and look at how do you build a sales system that is agile. So you have a spine that is agile and has the capacity to follow the channels of consumption. How do you build critical partnerships, right, for distribution and logistics that will help ensure that you can get the last mile delivery of your product to your customers and consumers. We shouldn't waste this. This is an opportunity to review your sales fundamentals and make adjustments. Do you really need the size of the sales team that you have? You know, I sometimes pull the legs of my commercial director to say, wait a minute, if I look at what has happened in the last 2 or 3 months, how much of our sales has come because of the effort of our sales team? Or how much of it is because of the brand that we've built? And therefore, we need to look at, okay, how much more do we expect if we truly deploy our sales team in the best manner? And if we can deploy them in the best manner, should we be looking at whether we actually need a sales team of that size? So just to summarize, sales was affected because of the impact on people not being able to move and supply chain. There are new opportunities as consumers move to new channels to fulfill their needs, especially online. Technology is a solid enabler and will be usefully deployed appropriately. It is not an end, but a means to an end. The last line becomes more critical, especially for physical products that have to be delivered. At the end, what will always matter, irrespective of the platform that you use, teams that always demonstrate that they're propositions deliver better value and make it easier for their customers or consumers to do business are the ones that will always win. So our focus should not be on the pandemic. Our focus should not be on the challenges. Our focus is how can we use this crisis opportunity to improve business and the way we do with our customers and consumers. Thank you for your attention, and if there are any questions, I can take them.
So much. Thank you so much, Mr. Alex Goma. Thank you. That was a wonderful session. Very grateful.